Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Lesley Hawkins, and I'm the VP here at Adidas Canada. I'm so glad to join you today. As we have been doing for the last few years, let me share my screen. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is moving from strategy to elevator pitch. So let me just wait till everything is up there. All right, we're live. All right, so for the next 15 minutes, let me talk to you about a subject that, quite honestly, has taken me about 30 years to refine. And it's how to build a strategy that can be easily explained in a 30-second elevator ride. So my personal mantra is that the only constant in life is change. And so coming out of the pandemic, obviously, we've seen major shifts in consumer behavior, in consumer expectations, and our ability to deliver against those changing preferences is really what is going to define our business success. Change is also a constant when it comes to strategic work. So your strategy is the direction for the future of your company, for the team. It will impact your structure and your business communications. So how do we build strategy? Well, I've learned over the years 4 key steps: research, draft, vet, and build. And I tried to come up with some fun short anagram for everyone, but that's the best I can do. So now I'm going to talk about the process in the first person, to be honest, but this is not a singular task. This is not something that you as a leader do in isolation, and it really requires the involvement of diverse stakeholders within the business. Not everyone in the business, like not just your strategy team, if in fact you have one, not just the leaders, but a diverse group of individuals that can drive some creativity, but also with some pretty healthy tension. So every strategy needs to start with research. So looking from the lens of your consumer, of your customer, of your associate. Like, who is your consumer and what are they looking for? What are they seeking? What feedback can you garner from your key partners or stakeholders? What is your associate experience within the company? What issues are impacting your business? What's happening in the marketplace? Honestly, you could go on and on and on. All questions to help you answer one question, which is, where is your greatest opportunity? So in a previous role that I held, I had an issue of stagnating market share. I was selling the product into our wholesale partners. The customer and consumer's reception to the product was solid. The product was being merchandised properly. It was supported by extensive marketing, and yet I still wasn't seeing any growth. So the research started. I looked at market reports, did a full SWOT analysis. I'm sure you've all done plenty of those. Competitive analysis, talked to friends, colleagues, consumers, visited retail stores. Ultimately, the research came back that there was always adjustments that could be made to product or to the marketing message. But more than anything, the product was caught in what I call the sea of sameness, where all brands of apparel kind of looked the same. There was nothing that looked decidedly different. It was hard for our consumers to find our brand. Their retail journey was not smooth. So that's where I set about to build the strategy that would help me really gain market share by differentiating our product within the market. So step 2 in building the strategy is starting with a draft. And quite frankly, it can be just as simple as a bunch of Post-it notes on a board with some keywords or thoughts. Really try to avoid focusing on the details and the execution of the strategy, but really focus on 3 key topics. The problem, what are we trying to solve for? The objective, what is the vision for the end game? And the outcome. So how are we going to measure if we are successful? So back to my sea of sameness strategy, I needed to solve for stagnating market share. That was really the problem I was trying to figure out. My vision was for consumers to easily find our product at retail, enjoy a smooth shopping journey once they entered our space, and The outcome was to drive higher traffic, higher conversion, therefore better sales, all of which would lead to growth in market share. One of the key steps in the process of building strategy is vetting. It's kind of your pulse check. It's your opportunity to make sure that you've stayed the course. So with draft in hand, I would suggest going back to your research. You're going to hear me say that a lot, going back into it, back step, back to the research, and really making sure that your strategy is answering the questions and issues that you recognize during your research. Are you focused on the right areas? Did you get sidetracked and into the execution part of the strategy? And that happens all the time. So to try and keep yourself grounded, try to take some time to share the strategy with key stakeholders outside of that group that you're already working with. So after a double check and you've done your vetting, now kind of comes the time to write out the strategy. And the best strategies are those that are laser focused. Keep everything down to the threes. I call it kind of the 3 pillars. Sometimes you can go to 4, but I would really suggest, because the human mind kind of works in threes, to stick to 3 pillars. Wherever possible, try to avoid industry jargon, or actually internal company jargon even, or creative marketing speak. And I can say that as a marketer, we're really good at adding lots of jargon, but you need to try and say it in as few words as possible. Make it as easy to understand from every level of the organization, no matter who you are. And the way you can really double check this is to test it out on others. So try talking to different people within the organization. Is it really easy for them to understand? Really, you want your strategy to be as intuitive as possible. So this is a good check. So with this strategy in hand, now it's time to focus on the structure. But why? Well, because there is not many new strategies that I've ever seen or built, quite honestly, that immediately match to your existing structure. So go back to your 3 pillars of your strategy and work with each pillar independently. And this has been a big learning for me. The moment you go back to each pillar independently, it forces you to focus. Focus on the tasks required to execute each pillar. What are the areas of responsibility? What outcome is needed? More than anything, ironically, coming from our last session talking about bias, by focusing on each of those pillars independently, it helps you avoid some of the people bias. And the people bias in this is building a structure to really match your top talent. Wherever possible, try to avoid using titles as well, right? That just adds more complexity, more confusion. So for my sea of sameness strategy, I needed a business development team, a team that was going to be focused on finding the right partner and negotiating terms and designing the space, merchandising, everything else. And I needed to look at what could be done internally and where I could outsource. In my particular case, I could outsource retail design. So just as you did during the building of the strategy, the same holds true for building the structure, right? Get back to the vetting. You got to vet your work. Try to make sure to continue to refer back to the strategy. Is your structure answering your need? Is there overlap? Are there gaps? So for my sea of sameness, I looked at a process map, and it was to make sure that for every major task and milestone, I had a really obvious owner. Another option is to use team charters. I know that there's quite a few companies out there that use team charters, and this really shares each team's major area of responsibility, decisions they lead, decisions they influence, and where they can veto. So, with a sound strategy supported with an appropriate structure, now you need people in the roles. So if you have an existing team, you need to try and take the emotion out of the process. Try to remove your bias by making it more objective. As we just heard, it is not that easy. It's definitely easier said than done. But if you go back to your process map or your team charter, that could be helpful. because in your team charter, you've clearly defined the areas of responsibility and decision-making for each team. So match that with what skills or functional knowledge do you need to fill this team? And build for each role a clearly defined skill set. You got that? All right, now literally put it aside. On a separate piece of paper, start mapping your talent, but looking at your talent for each of your team members of what are their areas of strength? What are their areas of interest as well? Because as much as possible, you'd want them to be in a role that matches both their strengths and interests, obviously. And where would you need some training and support? Then it's about matching the two. So going back to your clearly defined skill set by role and comparing it to your talent map. It's like the match game, right? Matching like for like. There are going to be instances where you don't have a match. And there are likely those that are going to be on your team that maybe you can stretch or you could train into the role. Once again, back to my sea of sameness situation. I needed a leader that could bring a vision to life. Needed to be super organized because they needed to be a strong leader. They were going to be leading a team. They were going to be managing customers. They were going to be managing multiple vendors, and hopefully had some retail development experience. Unfortunately, I didn't have anybody on my team who perfectly fit the role, but I did have someone who is clearly a strong leader, who was organized, who could bring the vision to life, but really needed to be coached in retail. So I made sure to surround them with teammates that were really strong in retail. So now that you have a clearly defined strategy, supported by a focused structure and driven by a solid team, what's next? Well, it always comes down to communication. Don't all of these presentations come down to communication, right? Because your strategy is only as good as the communication of the strategy, because it's more than a piece of paper, right? It's the direction for the future of the company and for your team. So it needs to be communicated clearly and often. For the team that owns each pillar, try having them present it during team meetings or gatherings that you would have. For each leader of the team, see if you can find an opportunity for them to share in like a town hall or a company function how their role and daily actions contribute to the strategy. Personalize it, really individualize it. Try having different team members share how they're going to deliver against the strategy, and avoiding the jargon, but actually what are their actions that they're going to take. Because the more that you and your team talk about it and add their own action plan, the more it gets fully ingrained into their ways of working and into your culture, which is ultimately what you want to do. And that's how it ultimately becomes less, it's not just a piece of paper on a bulletin board, right? Ultimately, you want it to be as easy as an elevator pitch. So imagine if you have 30 seconds on an elevator with your CEO and she asks you what you're working on. You would want every associate throughout the organization, irrespective of their role, to be able to clearly and succinctly talk to their current actions that they're doing to drive the strategy forward. So, as an example, well, for me to drive our market share, I'm working with a key retail partner to break the sea of sameness by introducing a shop-in-shop in their top 10 locations by the end of Q1. Within the shop-in-shop, we're going to have our key apparel franchises, cross-merchandise with footwear, and we're going to incorporate wayfinding, signage featuring our top athletes. Those are all the things that I'm working on to make sure that we deliver on our strategy. Now, as I said at the beginning, this is from 30 years of experience of putting together strategies, and I can tell you there are certainly enough pitfalls for you. So let me just share a few of the pitfalls that I've experienced. As I mentioned at the beginning, right, change is a constant with any strategy work. Strategy is flexible, it's malleable, and it is not a one and done process. It requires constant review, adjustment, and tweaks. It's a living, breathing document. I mean, just imagine if a business refused to update their strategy during COVID. I mean, that would be disastrous. Strategies that have been cooked up in the corner office and not built through collaboration or through a diverse team, unfortunately, are typically doomed to fail. Strategies full of jargon, whether it's industry or company jargon, marketing speak, complicated messaging, are also doomed to fail. They need to be easy to understand, easy to repeat, easy to pitch on an elevator, right? Because remembering that the strategy is the direction for the future of the company and for the team, so it has to connect with the team. So, your recipe for success. Build a strategy that has been researched, co-created, and vetted, right? Back to the vetting again and again. Create a structure that ladders up to the strategy with a focus on 3 pillars. And then map your talent to match those pillars and integrate the strategy into every communication, every team meeting, every town hall, every company activity. And ultimately, your elevator rides will be so much more interesting and far more engaging. Thank you. Now, do we have any questions? Can you give us a powerful elevator speech? Perfect. So the example that I tried to give was just that. It was clear and succinct on, this is exactly what I'm working on. I'm working with this partner to deliver this exact experience for the consumer to make sure that we are driving to the sales. So I'm building a shop in shop. Here's the vendors that I'm working with. Here's the product that's going to feature in there. And this is exactly how we're going to make sure that the consumer engages with the space. So if you go back to your strategy and make sure that not only is it easy to understand, but that doesn't matter who at what level in the organization really has the opportunity to connect with it and explain how their job, no matter the level within the organization, actually can ladder up. Any other questions? Oh, is the elevator pitch that strategy statement that you want every employee to be able to say when they're asked what your strategy is? So yes and no. I would say no, actually. So what you want the elevator pitch to be is what the associate is doing in their everyday to ladder up to the strategy. So in the particular case of the sea of sameness of here's exactly what me as a marketing person or a merchandiser or whomever, this is what I'm doing to ladder up to the strategy. So it's less about what you don't want is people standing in elevators just regurgitating the company speak. What you want is them to personalize it. Here is what I do every day to wake up thinking about strategy and delivering on that strategy. Any suggestions to influence the C-suite when strategy is being defined behind closed doors with little interaction from leaders of the various business units? Okay, so I totally hear you on this one, Doreen. The reality is that anything that is cooked up behind closed doors with a small group of people in the C-suite, unfortunately, is destined to fail. And so what I have tried to do through my, no matter where I was in my career, is to actually spend some time providing feedback up into the C-suite of, here's some ideas that I have. Here's where I find some space within the marketplace. Here's what I feel in my job, didn't matter what role I was in, where we're missing some opportunities. And the more we can spend time with those in the C-suite and getting their attention to actually what it's like at the everyday level and what's actually happening within the business, the more opportunity there is that they will actually open the door and be more receptive to some of the feedback. So just keep knocking on the door, keep providing feedback, because those that are in the C-suite don't necessarily have a lot of time to be spending actually on the ground floor. All right, I think we got one more question. All right, how do you accelerate the entire process for organizations that operate on a fast-changing environment with short life cycles? So I totally hear you on the short life cycles, Roger. So a strategy can be multiple years. So it could be a 5-year strategy, a 3-year strategy, or you can have a 3-year strategy that in actual fact has quarterly or even by half mini strategies. And that particularly allows you to be far more nimble depending on the kind of business that you're in. So it will all, as you look at those 3 pillars or 3 or 4 pillars that you're building, what you want to do is to make sure that there is a time for each of them, and they don't all need to run 3 years. There could be some portion of the strategy that actually just gets you off the ground floor. That might take 6 months. And then the other couple of pillars are going to take you a year or 2 years to fully execute. But ultimately, you need to make sure that the strategy that you're building actually matches the kind of pace of organization that you have. All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate everyone's feedback and comments. And if you want to join me on LinkedIn, it's in my profile and also shared on the chat. So thank you very much. I wish you all a wonderful day.